welcome to On Our Minds Audio Edition. I'm Kacie Willis, Manager of Audience Research Programs at Wolf Brown, and we're bringing you a qualitative research podcast in support of our On Our Minds e-newsletter, which we hope you're signed up for, by the way. At Wolf Brown, we strive to collaborate with industry leaders to build a more equitable, more pluralistic, and more sustainable future for artists, organizations, and whole ecosystems. And we were so privileged to have the opportunity to expand upon our research practices by interviewing Bamuthi Joseph and Trés McMichael from the Kennedy Center's Social Impact Team, who were gracious enough to make time to chat with us during a work visit to Detroit, home of Wolf Brown's main office. Our conversation was a deep dive into the lingering issues surrounding systemic bias and inequality in the arts sector. Since the summer of 2020, many arts and cultural organizations have been forced to examine their commitment to DEI efforts. And while the gravity of the conversation is not always easy to face, we at Wolf Brown are committed to elevating the perspectives of leaders in our sector who are encouraging new ways of thinking about these topics and will hopefully help inspire new ways that our sector as a whole can analyze and take action. Let's begin today's conversation by introducing you to our special guests.
So, hey. Thanks for having us here in this very interesting room, in this very beautiful home. My name is Trés McMichael, and I am originally from Baltimore. My whole family's from Baltimore. I grew up there. My background is mostly as a musical theater performer, but I've also studied some opera and some dance and some theater, and I really love research. I really love apple juice and riding my skates as the sun sets in DC. And I really love the work that I do at the Kennedy Center as a part of our social impact team. So currently I'm in as the role as the Civic Alliances Manager, and I've been there for about 2 years, and have now made DC my home. And so excited to be here and share the space and to talk a little bit more about the work that we get to do every day.
My name is Marc Bamuthi Joseph. I'm a first-generation American of Haitian descent. I'm a dad and an artist. I work at the Kennedy Center as the Vice President of Social Impact and the Artistic Director of Cultural Strategy. I'm also a writer and performer. Doing a little, well, I was about to lie. I am not doing a little less performing these days. I'm embodied as a writer and performer. I'm working more in the classical realm these days with opera, orchestra, and symphony, and really happy to be here.
In the arts and culture sector, we use many terms that are essentially a part of a shared vocabulary of sorts. And one of the most common terms used by organizations all over the country is community engagement. Now, clearly, this term likely isn't being used with ill intent by anyone, but our special guests had some thoughts on the ways in which the intentionality surrounding the term may not necessarily always align with the results. What does re-examining the use of the term community engagement have to do with systems of inequality in the arts sector? Let's find out now.
My belief, and I think our institutional belief, is that it is incredibly important to engage the community as part of an equity strategy. And for the most part, the history of community engagement in arts organizations is a method towards diversification of audience. So it's kind of a cycle where you do a program and very often photograph and document that program, and that becomes the end in and of itself. It's a way to measure just that, engagement. But I believe that the incubation of design infrastructure is really important for arts organizations and cultural organizations to take on as an ultimate end. So the aversion to community engagement has much more to do with the history of the term than the actual engagement of community. The additional aversion is the finality in terms of the modality of community engagement. We were just talking actually at our first rehearsal, and an opera singer mentioned an opera title and asked if we thought that was social impact. And in responding that it wasn't, we mentioned a lot of things that Trés just talked about, that in order to have impact, things can't stay the same. Like, that's actually the thing. It's not social stay the same, it's social impact. A lot of engagement practices are focused retroactively. There's been a tremendous and systemic wrong being done, and so we do programs to address the people who have been aggrieved or the people who have been blindsided by systemic injustices. My belief, and I think our institutional practice, is that we can use those same resources to think very critically about a culturally equitable future. So rather than looking back, we want to look ahead and think about this this ideology where we articulate a social vision. We articulate a theory of change, and we ask ourselves, who do we need to invest in now in order to pay for the future that we seek? It's a different approach than community engagement, which is about what do we need to do in order to brown our audiences, or in order to young our audiences, or in order to diversify our audiences in terms of making sure that marginalized communities are present and aware. So it's moving from a charitable paradigm to an investment strategy that's about paying for the future that we seek.
Just to add on to that, the reason I don't like the term community engagement is because communities are already engaged.
Right.
They just may not be engaged where you are,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so how are you, to Bamuthi's point, creating programs and structures and pipelines that allow people to not just be engaged in the space, but empowered, feel that sense of belonging, that sense of invitation, because culture happens everywhere all the time, whether we're there or not, right? And so how are we able to uplift and support culture where it's at and open our doors and say, well, we invite culture to be here too, but not saying culture's not present unless we're there, which I think is a little bit of the shift that we're able to make. And sometimes part of the reason we don't do everything at the Kennedy Center,
Right.
Something that I love that we ask a lot in our institution is what makes us national. And I think what makes us national is that everything we do isn't within our four walls, but we're able to reach out and go to other places and support culture where it is. And I think our department does a really great job of instituting that throughout the Kennedy Center.
I'll just say quickly that what's important here is that we also acknowledge our tremendous privilege as the National Cultural Center. We are able to make what's ultimately a 7-figure investment. $1 million of it is about local artists, but we're able to make tremendous investment in these areas because of our size. We can work at scale because of our size. But I often say that I am of the privileged and the hunted. And the folks that work on our team are principally in the same place. So there's empathy that drives this work. And honestly, coming where we come from with the ambition that we have, the urgency isn't philosophical. Like, it would be really hard to come home to dinner or really hard to go back to my block if we didn't evolve institutional thinking and we didn't use our privilege in order to set a model for how companies of our size and larger Not that there are very many organizations that are larger than the Kennedy Center, but we should be able to use our privilege to do this work and hopefully set a model for the country in terms of where art spaces should live and practice along this continuum. It's not that, it's not that the engagement itself from the institutional perspective isn't the right play. It's just to what end? What is the instrumentation? Is there a philosophy? Is there a strategy? And how long is the commitment?
Sticking with our shared vocabulary in the arts sector theme for a moment, another term that has been used throughout the past few years is the term doing the work, meaning that an individual or organization is committed to taking purposeful steps towards self-improvement or even healing. And while many arts organizations have been facing the necessary work, the individual actions are not nearly enough, according to our guests, who recognize that the issues preventing sustainable change in our industry can't be solved by one or even a few organizations, and will only be solved by examining the systemic nature of the intersectional problems that persist in the field.
If racism is structural, then anti-racism must be structural. If racism is systemic, then anti-racism also must be systemic. That philosophy comes out of just, a 20 plus year long career as a performer, at a lot of organizations that don't necessarily have this these structural paradigms in place. They are programs, but they are discrete and sometimes itinerant. A lot of times something will happen tragically in the world and our colleagues want to immediately respond. And what I often have to remind folks is that we have a systemic response, so that when something horrific happens, we don't have to run to make a statement. That the network and the ecosystem of programming is the statement. The amount of the investment, that's the statement. What we have to do is stand by these structural trajectories and not just the itinerant programs or the discrete statements. So we both feel it because we are people in the world, but we are both working towards it, if not a solution, then at the very least a modality which invites collective solution making. And maybe, again, that's a model that I would suggest to our colleagues and to the folks listening is let's think about the design for what we want to make. And let's use our spaces not only as places to present prefabricated culture, but to actually make culture. And that's that hip hop shit. MC, make culture.
So there's a quote that our good friend Adrienne Marie Brown, perfect human. They have this book called Holding Change. And in that book, they say, practice is how you become what you long to be.
Yes.
And I think that hits on so much of what we want to do. We long to have a more just, a more free, a more equitable society, a more equitable sector. And so we actively get to practice that because that's what we long to be. That's who we as social impact, as the Kennedy Center, long to be. And so all of our programs, what Bamuthi and Victoria, our senior director, have done, of create programs that allow us to practice that longing with each other as staff, throughout the center, with our other colleagues, and then also with our artists and with our community, that it's not just this kind of DEI committee, that sits in the back corner and comes out every once in Blue Moon, but that it's intertwined into the fabric of all that we do.
Up to this point, we've heard some amazing thought leadership addressing systemic inequality in the field and the ways that arts and culture organizations can begin to rethink or reimagine how they engage with community and grapple with systems of oppression. And while this work is challenging and nuanced, the ultimate goal for our sector should be to lay the groundwork for future generations of artists, administrators, and audiences so they can feel like these issues aren't insurmountable, and to also present a cultural landscape where people from different backgrounds and life experiences can feel welcome and connected by the power of the arts. It's not going to be easy, and it's not going to happen overnight. But we at Wolf Brown hope that sharing ideas from folks like Bamuthi and Trés can help inspire arts leaders like you all over the country. We hope that the insights that we've just shared will help to invigorate you and your organization's commitment towards a more pluralistic society, no matter what that looks like for you. We'd like to conclude our conversation by sharing the surprising motivating factor that both Bamuthi and Trés cited as the core of their work: joy. Yes, joy. Within this landscape and the ever-changing socio-political climate, centering joy as a source of motivation for your organization's inclusive practices to help dismantle racism and inequality may not necessarily seem intuitive, but maybe this will help you see it another way.
Joy is like my jam. Like, that is like what physically, emotionally, and spiritually gets me up in the morning. I think about it all day, every day. I try to embody it all day. When I took this job, there were two things I asked Victoria to allow me to do. And one was to hold every Wednesday to not have meetings, but to actually leave the Kennedy Center and go meet with our partners, meet with community, spend time with them, develop relationships with them. And the other was to have my first meeting every day be 15 minutes for me to center joy. And so like intentionally putting 15 minutes on my calendar every morning at the top of my day, and those 15 minutes for me allows me to enter into our space and our work from a place of joy.
Yes.
And everything else that comes from that is rested on that bid set of I've had moment for joy today, and can go then and prosper with it.
I didn't get involved in the arts to be miserable. I inspire for a living. And I can't do that from a place of misery. But it's really hard to do this job, which is to articulate a belief in the future, if you don't come from a place of joy and health. Anchor yourself in joy, laughter, and possibility.
This has been On Our Minds, a Wolf Brown podcast. For more information on our guests and the amazing work that the Kennedy Center Social Impact Team does every day, please visit kennedy-center.org/social-impact. This show has been hosted by me, Kacie Willis. The research and writing editors are Alan Brown, John Carnwath, and Anik Odom. Special thanks to Alan Klein and Sorrel Phillips. For more information about Wolf Brown's programming, including our Audience Outlook Monitor market research studies for the arts and culture sector, please visit wolfbrown.com. We're unlocking the power of art through research and conversation. Thanks for listening, and until the next time, have a wonderful rest of your day.